Hi everyone, welcome to Belle's Books. I'm Carly and today I want to talk to you about Between the Acts by Virginia Woolf. So I have just read this as part of the 1900 to 1950 readathon that is being hosted by Katie over at Books and Things. I will drop a link to her channel and the readathon in the description box below. And I wanted to speak about this because even though it is only a very short novel, it's Virginia Woolf, and I know I've gathered a few new subscribers, so hello and welcome to those of you who are new. On the recommendation of Milena from Milena Reads that I am a Woolf fan. She is correct, I am a Woolf fan. So I thought I would do a video about the Woolf that I have just read. So I have not read this before. I have read of Virginia Woolf's work so far Orlando, Mrs. Dalloway. I started reading The Waves and I wasn't in the frame of mind for it, I guess, at the time. I couldn't finish it. So that's one I'm going to come back to. And there is another one apart from this. I can't remember, it's gone out of my head. Anyway, today I want to talk about this. So, the first thing I want to mention is that I love Virginia Woolf's work, but it's not unproblematic, okay? So when I read Virginia Woolf, I love it. I love it for the experimentation of it because that's my bag. I am a PhD student researching experimental writing, so, you know, that's my jam. But it's not unproblematic because, and the thing that, it's such a strange experience reading Virginia Woolf for me, because particularly when I'm also reading contemporary fiction that deals with, you know, the current situation and things that are happening now. So when you read something that was written a long time ago, this was published in 1941, things are problematic in here. Some language is problematic in here. So there is kind of racist stuff in here, and you know, that's not okay, but it's of its time. I'm not apologizing for it, but it's just a warning to say that it's in there. And Virginia Woolf obviously writes from a position of privilege as a fairly well-off white woman. So a lot of her books come from that position. This book is set in a very nice manor house, and it's called Points Hall. So the book was originally going to be called Points Hall before she changed the title to Between the Acts. Also to say that this book was not finished. This was the last one that she wrote before she died, and there's an editorial note in here in the introduction from Leonard Woolf to say he doesn't believe that she was going to make that many changes. So the manuscript was finished and she would have gone through and made some changes, but he doesn't think that she would have made that many changes. And also looking at excerpts from her diary when she was writing this, it seems that it was the one book that she was most pleased with as she was writing it, and she really enjoyed the writing process, which I find quite fascinating. So the story of this book is set in one day, much like Mrs. Dalloway, at this big manor house. It's a day in June in 1939, and the village that this house is in all the village people are preparing for a pageant. So it's a very lovely very nice thing. It's a summer's day. Everyone is coming to the grounds of this big old beautiful house to watch the pageant put on by all the villagers, and the pageant is retelling the tale of English history. So we're working through the ages of English history, and the villagers are kind of getting dressed up and doing these scenes to represent history, basically. And we follow various characters. So we're looking at the family that live in Points Hall, the Olivers. So we've got Bartholomew Oliver, who's this old dude, aristocracy. His sister Lucy, who lives there and is a nice old lady. Then we've got the young married couple who are the son and daughter-in-law of Bartholomew. So Giles is his son and Isabel, or Isa, is his wife. So we're looking at them as a family. And the thing that I really like about Woolf is that it's written in third person, but we have shifting perspectives from each of the characters. So she'll use that third person narrative to describe how Bartholomew is thinking, how Isa is thinking, how Giles is thinking. And the thing that I love is when she describes how thoughts are fleeting and move around really quickly. So I've marked out some quotes in here that I really enjoyed. So I'm going to read some to you because I think that they speak well to all of the themes in this book. So this was really nice to read this in summer, actually. I read this over a couple of days of a weekend, and it was really sunny, and it's a nice kind of summer read because, you know, they're all in summer having a lovely time at this pageant. But one of the biggest theme from this book for me is time, and what Woolf does with trying to convey how we experience time is different from the way that society has made us believe time exists. So we have clock time, or the way that we mark time out, as in, you know, the patterns of the day that we follow on the clock, and the way that we see time as linear and events as sequential, which is represented through the pageant, the way that the pageant goes through each different period of time. And then we have the actual ways that characters experience time, which is represented in the way that she kind of uses her prose and her characters' like free flowing thought processes to convey the fact that we don't just live in this linear narrative, we live in the past, the present and the future, and it's all kind of mixed up. Let me give you some quotes to kind of explain better what I'm trying to say. So at the beginning, we've got the household of Points Hall preparing for the pageant. So we've got the servants in the house getting the food ready, and old Lucy is going to put a sign on the barn because they're all very concerned about the weather. If it's going to rain, then they're going to have to do the pageant in the barn. And if it's going to be fine, they can do it out on the terrace. So, you know, all of these nice problems there. So in the kitchen then, we've got a couple of characters who are sorting out the food. And this passage I thought really illustrated how our thoughts are just not linear, and that when you have one instance or one infinitesimal thing that will trigger a memory, a feeling, so another thought, and the way that your thoughts can just be like, this is, I'm dancing, yeah, I'm doing this and go off on a tangent. Okay, so they're making sandwiches. Mrs. Sands fetched bread, Mrs. Swithin fetched ham. One cut the bread, the other the ham. It was soothing, it was consolidating, this handiwork together. The cook's hands cut, 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 whereas Lucy, holding the loaf, held the knife up. Why stale bread, she mused, easier to cut than fresh? And so skipped, sidelong, from yeast to alcohol, so to fermentation, so to inebriation, so to Bacchus, and lay under purple lamps in a vineyard in Italy, as she had done often, while Sands heard the clock tick, saw the cat, noted a fly buzz, and registered, as her lips showed, a grudge she mustn't speak against people making work in the kitchen while they had a high old time hanging paper roses in the barn. I just love that. I thought that was fantastic. All of these little instances of experience, something you're doing with your hands, something you notice out of the corner of your eye, something you're thinking about, all goes to make up that instant or that moment that you're experiencing at that time. and you're in the present, or these people are in the present, but there's so much more involved in that present moment. And I just thought that was what Woolf does, and she does it with all of her work, is just fantastic. I don't know whether, well, I haven't read all of Woolf's work, but I don't know, I just found this novel really accomplished, and by the end, when it got to the end, like, I wrote a lot, I had underlined a lot, and I had got a lot of notes, because it was all coming together, and it just felt like, yes, this is everything that she's trying to do and get across about time not being linear. Okay, I'm gonna have to edit the hell out of this because I've got lots I want to say. So that's the first thing I wanted to say about the way that she deals with characters, and you're moving from one character to another and getting inside their heads and understanding what they're all thinking. One of the other big themes in here is criticizing gender roles. So Isabel and Giles have a small son. I think they've got 2 children actually, but the focus is on the little boy, because the little boy is out with the nurse or the nanny or whatever they are, and old Grandpa Bartholomew comes along and tries to play a joke on him, which is really not funny, by getting his newspaper, rolling it up and forming it into like a beak and shouting at the little boy, and the poor little boy's like, what? And so cries because his granddad has scared him, and he takes offence to this. Of course he does. And then goes back and tells Isabel that her son is a coward because he cried. So there's that little incident. Okay, so he's explaining to Isabel what he did. I took the newspaper, he explained. He took it and crumpled it into a beak over his nose. So he had sprung out from behind a tree onto the children, and he howled. He's a coward, your boy is. She frowned. He was not a coward. Her boy wasn't. And she loathed the domestic, the possessive, the maternal. And he knew it, and did it on purpose to tease her, the old brute, her father-in-law. She looked away. So there's like little instances like that. And there's one later on with the character of William Dodge, who's a guest at the house that day, who is obviously gay, and he's an artist, I think, and he gets introduced as an artist, and he tries to downplay it because he knows what that connotation is, where she just puts in these little instances, these little interactions between people that just speak volumes about the characters and the judgment that is placed upon them by the society at the time. And there was a really heartbreaking one where he's so William Dodge is having a conversation with, I think it's Lucy Swithin, the old lady, and there's a lot that Virginia Woolf does with things not being said as well, or conversations anticipated, things that characters would like to say and can't, or because of like social expectations and the way they're supposed to behave. So this is William with Lucy. And he wished to kneel before her, to kiss her hand and say, at school they held me under a bucket of dirty water, Mrs. Swithin. When I looked up, the world was dirty, Mrs. Swithin. So I married, but my child's not my child, Mrs. Swithin. I'm a half man, Mrs. Swithin. A flickering, mind-divided little snake in the grass, Mrs. Swithin, as Giles saw, but you've healed me. And so he wished to say, but said nothing. Oh, there's just passages like that just blow me away. And particularly with that repetition of her name, there's something about repetition in here that like forms a rhythm. And as part of the pageant, there's a machine. I think they've got a gramophone going on because they sometimes play music, but there's a repetitive sound that goes through the whole novel, and it keeps coming up. And there's something about that repetitive. It's like a ticking clock, again, as a marker of time, as an idea of a linear progression. Something is happening, something is going to happen. This novel is set just before the outbreak of World War II, and there's a very strong sense of that anticipatory, something is going to happen here. And you know that although they're having a lovely time, it's summer, it's all very nice, all hell is about to break loose. And there's a very ominous part where all these planes go over them, and they all kind of look up, and the sound of that is a real kind of reverberation, and it's like it's saying, you know what's going to come, the war is going to happen, all this nicety is going to fall apart. And I found that ever so powerful. Okay, so the thing about the pageant that I found really fascinating is that it was done in like intervals. So they had a little part where all the villagers would come on in their fancy costumes, and they would act out scenes from history. So I think they had like early Britons, Plantagenets, Tudors and Stuarts and all this. Oh, let me find this quote because it's fantastic. But because they were trying to represent the whole of history, there's a great quote in here where they were like, well, if they try and do everything, we'll be here till midnight. Yeah. Oh, and here's a reference to the machine. The singer scamped away into the bushes. The tune stopped. Chuff, 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 the machine ticked. Mrs. Manraiser looked at her programme. It would take till midnight unless they skipped. Early Britain, Plantagenets, Tudors, Stuarts. She ticked them off, but probably she'd forgotten a reign or two. Ambitious, ain't it? She said to Bartholomew while they waited. Chuff, chuff, chuff went the machine. Could they talk? Could they move? No, for the play was going on. And then it goes on a little bit, and then at a little further down it says, marking time, she said old Oliver beneath his breath. Which doesn't exist for us, Lucy murmured. We've only the present. So there's a lot Woolf is trying to do in this book about getting the reader, I think, to consider the way that we view time passing, which, you know, she does very well in To the Lighthouse and The Waves and Mrs. Dalloway as well. So she has all of these characters play out these parts, and in the intervals the audience kind of get up, move around, go for sandwiches, come back, and they're following their programme, and they're waiting for this pageant to end, basically, to get to the point of now, to go through the linear markers of history, and up until the point where they're expecting the now to be represented. The woman who's running the play, I think her name's Miss Latrobe, she gets experimental, and she leaves a gap, like a silence, a pause for the audience to get uncomfortable. And I love that, because they start, you know, shifting around in their seats and like, what is she doing? Why is it taking so long? And then the players all come out with mirrors, with all different kinds of reflective objects, so mirrors and shiny things, and hold them up to the audience so the audience see themselves reflected. And so that was just like, blew my mind a little bit. I was like, this is so cool, because what she's trying to do is say, this is the present, this is the now. These are all the parts that we have played. These are all the parts that we are playing. You are participating. You're not just the audience watching. You're participating in that. And for me, that really spoke to the fact that me as a reader, or whoever is reading this book, is also participating. I'm participating in this narrative, because it made me go, oh yeah, I'm not just observing this or watching this play out. I felt like the mirror had turned on me. I felt like she was holding it up to me and go, look at your part, look at what you're playing, look at the act you're putting on, the performativity of who you are. And it just was so good. Oh my God, I just love it so much. And the audience gets so uncomfortable when they see themselves. They're like, oh, I don't want to look at myself. And that reflective nature of your part that you play, because throughout this, she frames these characters as they're all playing their parts. Mrs. Manraiser, who's like the saucy neighbour who Giles is in love with, keeps looking at herself in her mirror and putting on her makeup. And everyone, all these like upper class people are not happy. Isabel is unhappy because she fancies the farmer. She can't be with him because she's married to Giles. Giles is unhappy because he fancies Mrs. Manraiser. Can't be with her because he's married to Isa. And, you know, and on and on. So there's all this tension and conflict, but none of it's spoken, and it's all very, because this is, you know, the upper classes and everyone has to play their part and not speak out. It's just sort of bubbling under the surface, and which is mirrored by the fact that it's all about to kick off with the war. Oh, it's just so good. Oh my gosh, you guys, I loved it so much. And also I think that she's kind of reflecting on the fact that the way that modernity has prompted such sudden change. So like in a few generations, from Victorian era to the Edwardian to when this is like now, I think it's Mrs. Swithin, Lucy, who's thinking about the changes that have happened really quickly, from traditional ideas of family, which are still upheld in here, but like the changes that technology have wrought. Okay, so this is the quote. Time went on and on like the hands of the kitchen clock. The machine chuffed in the bushes. If they had met with no resistance, she mused, nothing wrong, they'd still be going round and round and round. The home would have remained, and Papa's beard, she thought, would have grown and grown, and Mamma's knitting. What should she do with all of her knitting? Change had come, she said to herself, or there'd have been yards and yards of Papa's beard, of Mamma's knitting. Nowadays, her son-in-law was clean-shaven. Her daughter had a refrigerator. Dear, how my mind wanders. Oh, she's thinking about technological changes, the way that people's lives have changed, because at the beginning, we're in this big house. Yeah, they've got servants and they have to order their meals with their servants, but that's not going to be a way of life anymore. You know, that whole big house culture was breaking down, the classes were breaking down, and people were living differently. And it was, you know, this was a real kind of reflection on that. Oh, I just loved it so much. I just thought it was fantastic. It just feels like, I don't know, her most accomplished, maybe. Yeah, anyway, I'm gonna stop gushing now because this video is getting on in time. So talk to me in the comments below if you've read this. What did you think of it? Like I said, I know it's not unproblematic. There is a bad word in here, and I'm not I'm not condoning that. There are a couple of racist comments. Virginia Woolf was a white woman with privilege writing in, the early 20th century. That's of its time. So yeah, there's some tricky things in here, but I really love it for its experimentation, particularly its emphasis on time and asking you as the reader to unpick that. I just think it's fascinating. I'd really love to hear your thoughts, so please do talk to me in the comments below. One thing I'm thinking about doing is like a little potted history of experimental writing. So do a video on early modernists, and do like a little bit of a trajectory of like a spotlight on certain authors. So if that would be something that you would be interested in, let me know. And I will see you again next week for another video. Take care, everybody. Bye.